Welcome to the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Matthew Connor here, host of the Cyber Business Podcast. Today, we're joined by Andrew DeBratto, CIO at Hunton Andrews Kurth LLP. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Matt, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on. Before we get too far in, a quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. Do you know if a hacker's in your system? Most people and most companies don't until it's too late and the hacker's already done damage. A hacker's job is to bypass your security, so companies need a way of knowing when someone's gotten past theirs. That's where Cyberlinks comes in. We partner with the best cybersecurity companies in the world to be able to provide our clients with the best solutions at the best prices. So whether it's managed SIM, SOC, EDR, MDR, XDR, you name it, we'll help you find the right solution at the right price. Find out more at cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. And now back to our show. Andrew, for those who aren't familiar, can you tell us about Hunton and your role there as CIO?
Sure. So Hunton is a what's known as a G100 law firm or an AmLaw 100 law firm. It means we're part of the 100 biggest law firms in the world or the country. We have 20 offices around the world, and full service corporate law. We do litigation, transactional work, a lot in the security and privacy space. It's a great organization.
Love it. It's funny. My wife and I we're now empty nesters. Our youngest just went off to college, and her goal is to go to Harvard Law and work for big law when she comes out. So she's very excited about that, and I don't blame her. So it'll be interesting. So what's your take? And this will be interesting. What's your take on kind of that big law career? In terms of IT and for lawyers, because I mean it's a totally different world than other law. I mean it's completely different. So you look at those small law firms, it's a different world.
Yeah. I always sort of scratch my head and wonder how some of the smaller firms do it as far as the requirements around cybersecurity and the cost of software and just the run rate it costs to run this business, month in, month out, year in, year out. I've been in the legal space. I was actually just looking at this earlier for about 20 of my 25-year career.
Wow.
I've been with 4 different firms. As much as I thought legal was unique, and in a lot of ways it is, there was a stint where I worked for a large mechanical, electrical, and plumbing organization that I was shocked to find out as soon as I got in there, it was set up just like a law firm. There were the different trades, and each trade had their partners and associates, and you had summer associates that came in. So it's something that most of my career has been in this space, and I will most likely finish my career in this space. It's a great place to work. You work with highly educated, highly motivated people who really have passion for serving their clients. And we as the IT team really try to meet that passion. And really, I preach, our team probably gets sick of me saying it, but operational excellence. We really want to nail the blocking and the tackling, the keeping the lights on. And we feel like, if we can hit those marks and we can keep the attorneys profitable and billing and working and, online, then we have that political capital to innovate and to work on innovative projects like what's going on with generative AI and all of the other things we see permeating through the legal space.
You said something that I think is just so important and so many people overlook, and it's the operational excellence.
Mm-hmm.
That pursuit of excellence is so really important, I think, to everybody and every organization. And I think it goes overlooked too often because, whether it's an entrepreneur or anybody else, you always hear, oh, be careful of being a perfectionist. There's no perfect, right? And that leads people to think, oh, well, then I don't want to be a perfectionist. So let me just pump out as much stuff as I can. Well, you don't want to pump out garbage either. So then where's that balance, that kind of, and a lot of people take that 80-20, perspective. Like, well, we'll just try to, follow that 80-20 rule. Okay. But that's really not going after and pursuing excellence. And I think
Right.
that really kind of it does a lot for an organization and an individual when they're pursuing excellence versus anything else. So I just kind of want to dive in there a little bit and kind of get your perspective on it because you do it. I know you hammer it with your folks, but I think it's so important. And is this something where you're always talking about that idea with them and driving that home?
We do. We talk about it quite a bit, and really credit to our team and our management team. We have a team of working managers. Myself, all the way through our management structure, we're in the weeds every day. And so we're having daily stand-up calls. We're looking at systemic issues. Back to your 80/20, if Outlook is crashing 20% of the time throughout my day, that's a problem, right? And
Yeah.
we have to address that. So I really credit our team for really buying into this premise. But again, it's what buys us the credibility to then go to the table and say, hey, we want to do this large scale, innovative initiative. There's a book that I read recently, and I reached out to the author just to thank him for writing the book because some of it was, I think, just affirmation of a lot of the same things I believe. And maybe it was just, I found my people kind of a thing. But the book's called Fostering Innovation, How to Build a Great Technology Team, I believe it is. And the author is Andrew DeBratto. And he's now, I believe, the chief operating officer for the Vitamin Shop.
Oh,
And he
cool.
was nice enough to come in and speak with our team. So one of the things I do is I hold a quarterly all IT meeting because we have people all over the world. There's about 90 people on our IT team. And, I want them all on the same page and I want them to understand why we're doing what we're doing, why, try to get everybody rowing the boat in the same direction. But reading his book, he took this to another level, which he had 4 levels in a pyramid. And keeping the lights on is that base. And then it's doing it efficiently. And then it's there's innovation is at the top. And I can't remember. I always forget the third tier of the pyramid. But it really kind of reinforced that this is something we really need to be hammering home. And I went as far as to our team probably got sick of me talking about this book. And I offered to anyone on the team who wanted a copy, I will buy you a copy. And so I was shipping these books out to people all over the place. And as I said, he was nice enough to come and speak to the team. But it really speaks back to this is something that we truly believe in, that we exist to service the business and we exist to keep the business running efficiently. And so that's really sort of the North Star that we're always striving towards.
I love it. So let me ask you, because I don't think people generally think of a law firm when they think innovation, right?
Mhm.
They tend to be more conservative, and then that's I think that's all well and good, but kind of how do you balance that, the one, the security, but then also two, the innovation, and three, providing the service, like you say, keeping the lawyers up and running.
Let's see if I can take those in order. So from a security perspective, law firms are a treasure trove of information. There have been, numerous known campaigns from Luna Moth and gangs like that have been directly targeting legal. So we're fortunate that we have the leading security and privacy practice probably in the world within our firm. So we take security very seriously because we have people on the ground who are advising clients. So we eat our own dog food. We do the things that we should be doing. When we do penetration tests or when we do tabletop exercises, they're not vanity projects to check off a box for a compliance checkbox. I tell the team and I tell the pen testers and the people we bring in, I want you to find the flaws because that makes us better. I want to do whatever it takes to make us 1% better, 1% more secure. So we take a best of breed approach. Like we haven't really gone into, well, I'm just going to buy the full, platform. And yeah, it does a lot of things well, but not great. So we try to take a best of breed approach, and we're serious about security. But at the same time, we can't all be wearing tinfoil hats, and everything's not a nation state attack, right? We need to be practical at the same time. So the practicality comes in trying to find that balance of friction. How much friction, are we asking our people to undertake and consume versus what is really necessary? Again, it's the blocking and tackling. We have to nail the basics. And so we really started the endpoint out. We want the endpoint to be rock solid. And we've spent, a good amount of, operational time as well as, technical innovation really working on the endpoint. Because our people are all over the place. And with work from home culture and with, visiting clients, it's not the castle analogy anymore. It's, the hotel analogy where you come into the lobby and then you need your key card to get into the gym and you need your key card to get into the pool and you need your key card to get into the room, right? Whether you want to call it zero trust or whatever mantra you want to put it under, it's really trying to nail the basics and make sure we're doing everything in our power. But even going beyond that, we're probably one of few firms that does micro-segmentation, where we have micro-segmentation from our endpoints, our servers, of what process, port, protocol is allowed to talk to each other. Now that comes with a lot of operational overhead. Our team spends a lot of time troubleshooting and triaging, access issues, but it's a necessary evil for what we do. On the innovation front, we really try to look 1,000 yards down the field. And again, credit to our team. We have some really forward thinkers and people that were, I think, ahead of the curve when it comes to tools like Power BI and the Power Platform. What we're doing with our AI program, we're really trying to stay on not necessarily tip of the spear, but on the forefront of what is available and what is reasonable and workable as we implement these tools. And we try to do it responsibly, fiscally responsibly. If you look at the cost of some of these AI tools and these AI platforms, you could blow through your budget really quick. So we try to do it in a reasonable, fiscally responsible manner. But that's where the innovation comes in, which is we want to be giving our lawyers the best tools, the best data, and the best security across the board. So all they need to think about is servicing their clients.
Yeah. And I think that's really interesting because as you look at AI when it comes to law practices, there's been some people who've kind of overused it. I think, there've been some pretty interesting stories about people
Yeah.
who've cited, cases that didn't exist, in their filings and whatnot. And okay, fine. But how do you balance that, and where do you see that going, for lawyers? Because obviously you want lawyers to be supercharged. I mean, your IT team is now supercharged with AI. They can find problems, so much faster and troubleshoot so much better. Thanks to all the great AI tools
Yeah.
out there like ChatGPT and Grok and Gemini, you name it. So the same needs to be true, you would think, for attorneys to be able to quickly research, but the stakes are higher, right, for the attorney, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that it's necessarily just prompting to say, great, I've asked you to, to write this. Now I want you to go and pretend that came from somebody else and make sure that all of those references are true. Maybe that does work. I don't know. But how do you balance that with, for lawyers, how do you get them supercharged with these tools that aren't perfect when the lawyers
Yeah.
need to be perfect?
Well, you hit a nail on the head, which is the tools aren't perfect. And that's something we are very upfront with our attorneys and our staff about. And one of the requirements before you get access to any of these tools, any of the tools that we sanction and deploy, you have to go through an ethical and responsible use training module that we put together in combination with our general counsel. And that goes through talking about hallucinations. But at the core of what we are trying to communicate is that at the end of the day, you're responsible for your work. And we have to have a human in the loop throughout the process. You can't, I mean, I always equate it to, it's no different than if I was just to go to Google, take something off of Reddit and say, well, this is gospel, right? That's just not reasonable. And
Yeah.
it's the same with these tools. There's a researcher, I believe he's out of France, who's tracking every time a instance of this happens in the courts. And a couple months ago, I was asked to pull this information for our managing partner. And at that point, there was about 116 instances where the courts had a sanction against an attorney, a firm, whatever it may be, I was just checking it the other day, and this is only about four months or so since I looked last. It's now over 300, right? So the problem is not slowing down. It's, arguably accelerating.
Yep.
Now, half of those are people who are representing themselves. So you can throw those out, but you still have 150, 160 instances where an attorney, had taken the step. One of the cases that we always cite back to was one of the first ones that really got national news was that Avianca Airlines case, where the counsel for someone who was suing the airline said, "Oh well, we have these 12 cases that we're using as our base of our defense or of our claim," and those citations ended up being all fabricated. Now, I will say the tools have gotten better, but we're seeing two different types of hallucination. One is a pure hallucination, just making up facts. That has gotten a lot better. The legal tools have done a really good job, or the legal vendors, of trying to build guardrails into the tools to prevent that from happening. It's not impossible, but they've done a good job. What is more common is misrepresentation, kind of conflating data and conflating information to where it makes it sound like it's representing the claim or the case or whatever the question is, but it's not really on point. But that's where you still need the human in the loop who's interpreting that. I was having this conversation with one of our attorneys yesterday where, they've run into this and they continue to challenge the AI model and spar with it and say, well, I don't necessarily agree, and iterate their prompt as they're going along to use it to build their final thought on what that answer is going to be to the question.
Well, how did that play out? Because I think the interesting thing when it comes to hallucinations is, one, finding them, and then two, challenging them. And I haven't personally run into enough of them, especially lately, to where I'm like, oh, great. And then you can build out sort of protocol to say, look,
Yeah.
this is how you do it. So I'm really curious with that attorney, how did the sparring go? Did it end up working out, very positively with the AI, ultimately producing something much better? Or was it, a frustrated lawyer who's like, this AI is an idiot who's defending, yeah, how did it end up playing out? Do you know?
Yeah, well, no, I'll tell you in this case, this particular attorney is one of our, I'd classify him as one of our power users. So he, I think, understands
Yep.
the limitations,
Hmm.
and he understands that at the end of the day, as he's going through that sparring match, he's ultimately making the interpretation of what the right answer is.
Right.
I can tell you from my own personal experience, something I was recently working on was researching token expiration for Microsoft 365 and
Yep.
specifically around Power BI, this token expiration. And what Grok and Gemini were bringing back were answers that it's like, yeah, this I get it, but the steps you're giving me and the modules within Microsoft Azure and whatnot that you're giving me, well, those don't really exist, or they're in preview, or it's not really set up the way
Yeah.
the tool is describing it. So that's where you get to the point to where you're like, am I sort of heading myself down a bad path? Now, consequently, we had another similar issue coming out of our pen test. We had a finding that we were working through. And the answer is, we use these tools to help us research and quickly get to the answer. And what we were looking for specifically was around how machines are joined to the domain and a certain attribute that gets flagged within that. And it's something we needed to change.
Okay.
And the answers we were getting back looked good, but we couldn't necessarily, like, it was, yeah, I have a high confidence that this is right, but it may be just easier to drop the machine from the domain and re-add it. So we took a low risk machine and proved that, yeah, no, the AI was right in this case. And just by doing that, it's going to save us a lot of time, effort, and headache versus dropping a bunch of machines from the domain and re-adding them.
Right.
So, at the end of the day, again, you have to make your best educated interpretation of the information.
Yep.
And then in our case, we have the luxury of testing it on a low risk, in a low risk environment versus going into a courtroom and saying, well, dear judge magistrate, this is the answer. no, that answer is not right, right? So understanding maybe your risk profile at the same time would probably be wise.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I love your analogy of just Googling and finding the Reddit thing and posting that as well, that's the answer. Because it is so easy to be misled because the answer that you get from a GPT is so persuasive. It looks so good.
Convincing,
And it's
yes.
very convincing. It's like, wow, there you go. My homework is done. Is it though? Because your homework came from, as you said, it's often Reddit or
Yeah,
something like that. And it's like,
yeah,
meh. And sometimes somebody nails it on Reddit, and you're like, that's an amazing answer. And then there's a lot of BS on Reddit where you're like,
yeah.
well, that is not right at all.
And
So,
it goes back to I was never a gifted programmer or scripter,
yeah,
right? I could look at scripts, JavaScript or login scripts and things like that. And I get it. I get what it's doing. I can interpret it, and I can tweak it and massage it and make it do what I want to do. PowerShell, routine scripts and things like that. But if you were to tell me to sit down at a terminal and start writing from the ground up, like that's never been my strength. But this is something that we've had this conversation before AI and after AI. If you're taking output from generative AI, Grok, whatever it may be, a PowerShell script, and you're going to run that on our network, you better damn well be sure you know what that's going to do. No different than copying and pasting something off of Reddit and running it
yeah.
on your network. At the end of the day, it's your responsibility to understand if you flip a switch, if you turn a toggle, you better know what it's going to do.
Yeah. And I think for scripting, it's really tempting to just copy paste the
Mhm.
script and be like, oh, okay. Because you're in a hurry, you just want the result.
Yep.
And then, you get all these vibe coders now. So who, they just go and they're talking to the, chat GPT, they get the code they want, they just drop it in, they have no idea, they're not proofing it.
Right.
And there are too many bad actors out there now who are, kind of gaming the system,
Sure.
and that's a great way once they've convinced, ChatGPT to drop this malicious code into
Yep.
anybody who asks for this, whatever. Not saying that's an easy
Well,
thing to do, but
we saw this with GitHub,
yep,
not too long ago,
yeah,
where there were just a proliferation of weaponized
yep,
projects being put out there. That it got to the point, like our people use GitHub for various different needs, where we're just shutting this down, blocking
yep.
it.
Yeah, no, that's another great example. Yeah, and people it's so tempting because you don't want to go through all of the code.
Mhm.
But you know what? But this leads me to an interesting, kind of a curiosity. So now in today's day and age where you've got people who maybe don't, they're not gifted coders, they may not even have the background or the experience, but with the help of AI, they are a far more effective coder. I guess this brings me to the question of when you're hiring, somebody you're hiring somebody,
Mhm.
is it the skills, the people skills, the certifications, the ability to use these things, you use modern tools. What is it that you're looking for, and what's that combination for you? How do you rank that? It's like, you know what, I love certificates. If they've got these certs, then and then they've got personality, cool, or don't really care for certs if they know their stuff, and
Yeah.
then they're nice people. I like them. How do you balance that, and where you lie on that?
Yeah. So this is a very common conversation we have. Attitude and aptitude are the two most important things. We want someone that is going to come into the team with the right attitude and has an aptitude to learn. We can teach you, right? This is not rocket science. I'm not the smartest guy. I'm not even the smartest guy in the room any day of the week of any of the conversations I'm in, right? But I have a good attitude and I have a good aptitude to pick this stuff up. So we just hired two new members of our team, and it was all about the attitude and the aptitude. Now, all of those other things are force multipliers, right? If you have certifications, I was just having this conversation with one of our technicians. They were asking me what my thought were on certifications. I have gotten 15, 14 certifications over my career. I have a bunch of them on the wall here that I'm very proud of. But it's, your phone's not going to start ringing off the hook if you go out and get a CISSP certification, right?
Right.
It's a great thing to have, and it's something that will differentiate you. And if maybe I'm looking at two resumes and I got two great attitudes and I got two great aptitudes, and I see this one person has spent all of this time getting a CISSP and a CISM and a CISA and a certified ethical hacker, and I'm hiring for a security role and they're security plus, but the other person didn't. Well, that's probably going to tip the scales. This person is taking the time to invest in their career. But attitude and aptitude, what you don't want is someone who ends up being a cancer and eats your team from the inside out, right? So we have, like I said, a really strong team and a strong management team that are working managers. So we invest a lot of time in just working sessions, and we have daily stand-ups. So everyone's on the same page of what we're working on, and they'll break out into breakout groups. We can teach you. We just need you to come with the right attitude.
Yeah. Now, I think that as we become more and more advanced, as a society with
Mhm.
technology, I think it really becomes, I think that's really what it comes down to. That's going to become more and more important, that it really is about attitude and aptitude,
Mhm.
because the other things can be learned and pretty
Yeah,
quickly, right? So it's not like it used to be where you'd have to, and it's not like you're hiring doctors where you have to go
right.
through med
Right.
school, right? So for most other jobs, the actual skill, it's not rocket science, right? So I agree with you. I think it really does come down to attitude and aptitude. So I was thinking about, the where we go from earlier. We were talking about kind of the AI and how we implement it and what you're doing on your side, and I can't help but kind of be curious as to where you think it's going in terms of with law firms in
Yeah.
particular, how where that's going in when it comes to AI and other technologies. And I'll give you, for instance, I don't know if you've seen Darktrace yet, but I think
Mhm.
Darktrace is super cool when it comes to using LLM for email security, and it makes perfect sense. I think they were when they started 10 years ago, it was a little too early. People weren't, you're trying to tell everybody what AI is and what LLM is. And now it's like, yeah, of course, why isn't AI scanning our email, coming in, going out for signs of, oh, this is a bad email, or you've been compromised because it's 2 a.m. and you're trying to send 1,500 emails, out,
Yeah.
to everybody, and you don't do that. So I think that's like a kind of one of these common sense, yep, that's where we're going with email security and stuff like that. Where do you see, things going in terms of law firms and the technology?
Well, in the legal industry, and just specifically talking about the practice of law, it's been an interesting arc in the conversation. When OpenAI released ChatGPT, if you looked at any of the news in the legal industry, it was effectively generative AI is going to replace lawyers, right? Now, that has greatly changed. Generative AI is going to be a productivity tool for lawyers. And I truly believe that's what it's going to be. What we're seeing in reality is it is a great tool to use to move through information quickly and to get to your answers, to start formulating your legal opinions quicker, right? Doing legal research, using generative AI for that type of work, document review, large scale, like e-discovery, doc review type of work. The robot can work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and never gets tired. But Bobby may need to go home because he's got to make dinner, and his son has a ball game that night, right? And so he's got to shut off, but the robot can keep going. Just being able to use it to formulate arguments and use it as I said earlier, like a sparring partner to bounce ideas back and forth and say, well, what would the counter argument to this be? And how would I formulate, sort of my thoughts on it? Um, this is not my idea, but it's something I have sort of stolen. I think what we're really seeing right now is we need people to be in a couple different verticals, right? You have your explorers. We need everyone to be exploring right now. Out there, playing with the tools, understanding the strengths, the weaknesses, what value a certain tool can give you to your workflow. And some of those are legal specific tools. Some of those are Gemini and Grok and ChatGPT, and how you can use them to make you more efficient, right? So we need everybody in that space today to eventually then move to a power user silo, to where now this is ubiquitous, it's part of my everyday, and it's just like using Outlook, and it's just like using Excel, and it's just like every other tool I use. And that's where we need everyone to get to, or where I want to see everyone get to. And then there's a third silo, which is this builder developer silo, where I think you're going to see the agentic AI, and where you're going to see those tools as an engine behind the scenes to better or more adequately or quickly serve up data, or to be used as a functional engine for something else built on top of it, right? That's more, I think, your IT and maybe some citizen developer type of roles, but that will be more of the IT side of things. We internally have taken kind of two parallel approaches with kind of a buffet mantra layered over the top. So we're building our own tools internally on top of Microsoft Azure OpenAI, and then we're looking at leading tools off the shelf, best of breed within the legal industry. And we're trying to give our people sort of that buffet approach where they can try and see a lot of these things. Some of them are practice specific, very much aligned with what a certain practice does, and others are just general platforms that do a lot of different things and sort of have a lot of different skills built into them for document review or summarization or tabular review, and the things that these legal research, the things that our RAS team, our library services team, or our associates are doing all day, every day. There's a tool that we're onboarding right now that just does benchmarking of deal terms. So you can take a deal term and put it into the tool, and it'll benchmark it against millions and millions and millions. This is what's called the Edgar database of public finance deals. So you can see, is that term that you're putting into your contract, is it market? Is it off market? How often does it get accepted? How often is it used? Maybe I like this writing better that was done by this other firm. I'm going to grab that and plug it into my term. So it's going to be, I used the word earlier, a force multiplier, an accelerator for our people to be able to get work done more efficiently.
Yeah, nope, couldn't agree more. I think that's fantastic. But as I hear you talk about all of these tools, and I think about and you mentioned it earlier, the cost of just the burn rate, right, for IT, for security is kind of impressive. It's not cheap. So how do you balance that with the cost savings? Where does that is there even an opportunity, or is that even a consideration when security and productivity are kind of paramount in today's day and age?
Yeah, well, speaking from a security perspective, we're talking really about the security of our clients' data, and this goes back to the ethical and expected use modules that we put our people through. You're not taking client data or firm sensitive data and putting it into ChatGPT. You're not putting it into Gemini. And we really hammer that. Now, we don't restrict people from getting to those tools because we really feel it's important that they have an understanding of all those tools. And like I use Grok a lot. I tend to like the output I get from that better than Gemini, right? So we want people to find what's giving them the results they expect or are looking for, but also at the same time understanding that we have a secure box, if you will, of tools that you're allowed to put data into. And we have clients who have guidelines that say what we can and can't do with their data. So you always have to be referencing that as well. Client XYZ may have a provision in their outside counsel guidelines that says, under no circumstances are you to put our data into any generative AI tool. So we have to balance all of that. And people really need to hear that and understand that we want you using these tools, we want you embracing them, but there are guardrails that you need to be working within. Now, speaking to the cost, this goes back to, as I mentioned, our buffet approach. We have not taken the step of we are just giving everybody every tool. The only tool that we make available to everyone across the board is our internal. It's basically a Chat GPT like tool, right? Everyone can have access to that. It's economical, but we can't give everybody access to every leading legal generative AI tool. It's just cost prohibitive. But what we're trying to do in our methodology is really pick the winners and losers and determine where we're finding value. Is it Microsoft Copilot? Is it this specific legal tool? Is it this specific legal platform? And then really make educated decisions from there instead of just throwing millions, and it is millions and millions of dollars against the wall and hoping something sticks and that we get some productivity.
Yeah.
I
Well, I
will tell
mean,
you though, realistically, we're not at the point where we're seeing meaningful productivity yet. I think we're still a ways away from that. I think we're in that exploratory phase of understanding how this can work for a legal team because a litigator's work is different than a transactional attorney.
right.
And someone in our finance or our marketing and business development team, what they do on the staff side is different than what an attorney does. Right? So we all have these different use cases and pockets of workflows that we're trying to find the right the right use cases, the right tools for.
Yeah. Interesting. So it's really not it's not a clear winner at this point in terms of productivity yet, like across the board. So whether it's in marketing or the, or the different branches of, the legal practice, not it's still exploratory. Interesting.
Look, I wouldn't be honest if I said that the tools were perfect
Mm,
and that it was making us 20% more efficient.
yeah.
It's just not the case yet.
Yeah.
Do I think we'll get there? Yeah, I think we will. I mean, I think we're going through this. Whether it's the Gartner curve or whether you just want to call it learning curve. We're going through this exploratory phase where it's really figuring out what tools make sense
Yep.
and how are people embrace and use those tools. If you go to a tool once and you don't get the output you expect, and then you go twice and you don't get the output you expect, you're going back a third time,
Probably
right?
not.
So we're also trying to be meaningful as we put these in front of what are very busy people
Yeah.
that, hey, we have something here that we really feel like can help you. And we're doing that through a lot of different channels, whether it's internal trainings, whether it's internal advocacy, people that we know are our kind of power users who are adopting the tools and seeing good results, harnessing those and using those as kind of wins that we can showcase across the firm to get other people thinking, oh, yeah, well, maybe that will work for me.
Yeah.
What it's really done, though, is it's really re energized a conversation with IT, from the business to IT. And how do we innovate? And how do we maybe take that next step in our technology journey?
Yeah. I I can't help but think that, you know, lawyers in general, I think they tend to be less technologically savvy, right? They just, as a general rule, they're not as tech savvy as the folks in IT, right? And so I think you get those power users, and I could be wrong. You have a much bigger, data set to
Yeah.
work with there. So please correct me if I'm wrong. But in my experience, most lawyers tend to be fine with technology, but not the power users, right? And I'd say that it's a smaller portion that are those power users. And I'm kind of curious, on the power user side, are you seeing the same sort of benefits or lack thereof that you see with kind of the average user? Because my initial thought would be that, oh, well, the average user, they're not really into it anyway. And so when they don't get that result the first or second time, they're not really looking at their prompt. They're not really looking at, did I do
Mhm.
something wrong? They're like, I'm busy next. I don't care about
Right.
this thing.
Right.
I got stuff to do. Whereas the power user's like, wait, I did something. Let me tweak that. And they tweak it. And they'll spend a little more time because they're into technology. But is that what you're seeing, that both the power users and the regular users not really getting a great kind of bang for the buck, if
No,
you
no,
will?
and a law firm, an engineering company. I worked in a financial services firm. You get the full spectrum of people who are, yeah, I get in, I check my email, and I do what I got to do. To people who are very, very technologically savvy and advanced and want to be part of that conversation. So
Yeah.
it's like any other organization. You get the full gamut, right? Um, your general attorney will get value just from the research perspective of being able to research and get information more efficiently than they did before. Everyone can do that today, and everyone can see that value today. And I'm always really encouraged when I'm walking through the halls and I stop and have a conversation with someone and they say, oh, yeah, I used our internal tool for this and it was great. Or I used Gemini. I didn't put client data into it. They always qualify it. I didn't put
That's
client
good.
data, but I used it for some research project. I was researching, biosolids for an EPA a project, and it was great because I didn't have to go through 30 Google links, and it got me the information back. Everybody is benefiting from that today.
Okay.
What we're not seeing is I have 10 clauses that I want to put in a contract, and just boom, it creates a contract for me, right? That's ultimately where we want to get to.
Mhm.
I have a gold standard of contract language, and I'm doing some real estate deal, and all I want to do is fill in a couple, who the client is, maybe their address, and let it just build this for me, right? That's
Right.
where we want to get to. That's where the efficiencies will really come in.
Yeah.
But everyone can get efficiencies today. You just got to take the time to get into explorer mode and go in and do it and not be afraid of it.
Yeah. Well, I think there's also the value in beyond yes, the creation, but even when you have your templated kind of, this is my gold standard of,
Mhm.
of terms, being able to then go and say, let's say, what risks did I overlook? Did I overlook anything that
Yeah.
that should be included here? Like, oh, geez, how did I miss that? Or,
Mhm.
oh, that's a really good point. So being able to have that kind of using AI as a second set of eyes on the
Yeah.
contract when you finished it before you send it out the door, be like, hey, just take another look at this. Did I miss anything?
Right.
Type of deal. I think is also, kind of
I think
valuable.
one of the struggles today is the number of tools. And
Yeah.
right now, it's really about, like, I got to go to this tool for this, and I got to go to this tool for this, and I got to go to this tool for this. So it's that exercise of having to constantly mind shift,
Yeah.
and task switch from different interfaces to different tools,
Yeah.
which I think over time will get better. As we see, one of the things that we've gone through in the legal technology market is really a consolidation over the years, right? There's a couple of document management systems, there's a couple of financial systems, and I think we'll see the same thing over time with the generative AI world.
Yeah.
The large companies will swallow up and integrate in, and then you'll have some point solutions that are serving a specific niche or need.
Yep. No, totally agree. Andrew, this has been an absolute blast. I thank you very much for coming on the show today. But before we go, can you tell everybody where they can find out more about you and more about Hunton?
Yeah, so Hunton.com is the firm's website if you're looking for legal representation. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm not hard to find. Andrew DeBratto. Feel free to reach out. I've had people randomly reach out to me who just want to talk about working in the legal industry as they're coming out of college, and this is something that that I would recommend. And so I love having those conversations.
Fantastic. Well, Andrew, until next time.
Thanks, Matthew.
Thanks for listening to the Cyber Business Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.